We're going to talk about trig ratios of special angles. So the first special angles we're going to talk about are the quadrantal angles. So let's label our quadrantal angles. So this is 0. Up here is 90 degrees, which is pi over 2. Over here is 180 degrees, or pi. And then down here is 270, or 3 pi over 2. And then back around to 360, which is 2 pi. So you need to know all 4 of these quadrantal angles in both degrees and radians. Now, when we find our trig ratios, we need to know our x, our y, and our r. So at these quadrantal angles, we can actually figure out what your x and y is by looking at a point where your r is equal to 1. So if this was just a point on your x-axis, this would be an x value of 1, 0. So that's x, y. Up here, if we're going up 1, so your x is 0, and you're going up 1, so it's 0, 1. To the left, now we're going to the negative x, so it's negative 1, 0. And down here, it's a negative y, so it's 0, negative 1. So here are my x and my y values for each of the quadrantal angles. With these, your r is always 1 because the length from here to here is just 1. Okay, so using these points, we can now find the trig ratios for each of these quadrantal angles. So sine of 180 degrees. So sine is y over r. At 180 degrees, we're going to be using this point, negative 1, 0. So our y value is 0. And our r value is always 1 for each of these. So it's going to be 0 divided by 1, which is just 0. So that's sine of 180 degrees. Cosine of 180, we're still using 180 degrees, so we're using this point. Now we want to find x over r. So my x value is negative 1. And my r value is again 1, which gives me negative 1. So cotangent of 270, now I'm going down here, so I'm using this point, 0, negative 1. And here's my x and my y. So cotangent is x over y. So my x value is 0, y value is negative 1. 0 divided by negative 1 gives me 0. So cotangent of 270 degrees is 0. Tangent of 90, so now we're using up here, this is 90 degrees, we're using the point 0, 1. That's your x and your y. Your r is always 1. Tangent is y over x. So my y value is 1. My x value is 0. Because you cannot divide by 0, you cannot divide anything by 0, this is actually undefined. There's no answer because you can't divide by 0. Okay, cosecant of pi over 2. Again, we're going to go up here, pi over 2. We're using this point, 0, 1. Here's my x and my y. Pi over 2, so cosecant is r over y. I know my r is always equal to 1. My y value in this case is also 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. That's my cosecant for pi over 2. Secant of 2 pi, now we're going all the way around to 2 pi. I'm using this point, 1, 0, here's my x and my y. And secant is r over x. So your r value is always 1. My x value here is also 1. So 1 divided by 1 gives me 1. So to find the trig ratio of any quadrantal angle, you just use the point where your r is equal to 1 and plug in your x or your y values. Okay, now we're going to talk about 3 special angles. We're going to talk about 45 degrees, 30 degrees, and 60 degrees. And you are going to need to memorize the trig ratios for these 3. I'm going to show you a quick way to memorize them after we go through and first find them all. So let's start with a 45-degree angle. So a 45-degree angle, if we draw it as a triangle, it's going to be a 45, 45, 90 degree angle. What that means is it's an isosceles triangle. And so remembering back to special triangles in geometry, there is a certain ratio that each of your sides have. So these two sides are the same, so it's 1 to 1. And then this ratio, the hypotenuse, is just root 2 times whatever these sides are. So this is going to be our triangle that we're going to use for 45 degrees. So this is my x value, this is my y value, this is my r. And we're just going to use these three and plug them into our sixth trig function. So sine is y over r, which is 1 over root 2. We cannot have square root at the bottom, so we're going to multiply by root 2 over root 2, which gives us root 2 over 2. Cosine is x over r, which is 1 over root 2 as well. So again, when you multiply by root 2 over root 2, it's going to give us root 2 over 2 as well. Tangent is y over x, which in this case is 1 over 1, which is just 1. Cosecant, we can either use r over y or we can flip this. So you can either flip this or you can plug it into r over y. It doesn't matter. Both ways will work. In this case, root 2 over 1 gives you just root 2. If you flip the root 2 over 1, that would give you the exact same thing. Secant r over x, root 2 over 1 again, also root 2. And finally, your cotangent is x over y, which is 1 over 1, which is also 1. So this is for 45 degrees. We have root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2, 1, root 2, root 2, 1. Okay, so let's move on to 30 degrees. So 30 degrees is another special triangle, because if we were to draw this would be a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And again, this is something from geometry where it is a 1 to 2 to root 3 ratio for 30, 60, 90s. So it's not really important you remember that. We're just going to use it to find our trig ratios. So again, my x value is the horizontal, y value is vertical, r is the hypotenuse. And again, we're going to plug these in to each of our trig ratios. So cosine is x over r, so root 3 over 2. Because the square root is at the top, we don't need to do anything to it. That's already simplified. Tangent is y over x, 1 over root 3. So this is one where we do need to multiply by root 3 over root 3 to get the root out of the denominator. This gives you root 3 over 3. You don't need to write a 1 in front of it. Okay, so cosecant, we're just going to be flipping these. So r over y is 2 over 1, which is just 2. R over x is 2 over root 3, so we do need to multiply by root 3 over root 3. So it's 2 root 3 over 3. And then x over y, root 3 over 1, which is just root 3. Okay, so 60 degrees is very, very similar because this one is also a 30, 60, 90, but your sides are a little bit different. So for this one, your x value is 1, your y value is root 3, and your r is still 2. So same numbers as above, it just changes a little bit. Your x and your y have changed. So sine of 60 degrees, y over r, is root 3 over 2. Cosine, x over r is 1/2. And then tangent, y over x, is root 3 over 1, which is just root 3. Cosecant, we're going to flip this, so it's 2 over root 3. Simplify to get 2 root 3 over 3. Secant, we're also going to flip this, so it's 2 over 1, which is just 2. Cotangent, we're going to flip as well, but we need to simplify. You get root 3 over 3. So notice here, from 30 to 60 degrees, your sine, cosine, and tangent are your cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So these right here, oh no, hold on. Your sine and your cosine have switched. That's what happens. So your sine up here used to be 1/2, and your cosine used to be root 3 over 2. And now your sine is root 3 over 2, your cosine is 1/2. So this is actually given a name, just so you all know. These are cofunctions because they have the same values when their angles are complementary. So sine of 30 degrees is the same thing as cosine of 60 degrees. Sine of 60 degrees is the same thing as cosine of 30 degrees. So this is just something cool to note. You don't necessarily need to remember exactly what they are. Really, they're just like partners. So sine and cosine, when they are complementary, so like 30 and 60, which means they add up to 90, they are equal when they have complementary angles. So sine and cosine, as well as tangent and cotangent, and then secant and cosecant. So those are the ones that switch. So notice here the tangent, cotangent have switched places down here, and then the cosecant, secant has switched places down here. Okay, so now we're going to put this all together and memorize this chart. So this is the chart that you're going to need to have memorized. We're going to memorize sine, cosine, tangent, and then our special angles are 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, which are also known as pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3. Okay, so sine of 30 degrees, we just found this out over here, is 1/2. Cosine of 30 degrees is root 3 over 2. And tangent of 30 degrees is root 3 over 3. So if we look at the same thing for our 45 degrees, I'm just going to fill these in from the ones that we just did. And then 60 degrees. Okay, so you need to have this chart memorized. The easiest way to memorize this, so go sine, cosine, tangent, and then increasing in degrees, 30 degrees, 45, 60 degrees, which is pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3. The easiest way to remember this is look at the top of these. This goes up 1, 2, 3. It's all over 2. And then cosine starts at 3 and goes backwards. So 3, 2, 1. So it's 1 over 2, root 2 over 2, root 3 over 2. And then cosine goes root 3 over 2, root 2 over 2, 1 over 2. And then for tangent, it's root 3 over 3, 1, and then root 3. So we're going to practice doing this a couple of times because this is super important that we have this memorized. So with this right here and the unit circle that we drew on the very first page, so I'm going to do that again. 0, 90, pi over 2, 180, which is pi, 270, which is 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi, 360. So with this and the points on your unit circle, so this is 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 1. With these two things, we can now find our sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent for any of these special angles. So some of them are very straightforward. Let's start by looking at sine of 30. So if it's just asking for sine of 30, we go to our chart. Here's sine. Here's 30. It's just 1/2. Done. So same thing when it's radians. Tangent of pi over 3. We look at here. Tangent, pi over 3 is over here. 60 degrees is pi over 3. So when we look on our chart, that meets up right here at root 3. That's tangent of pi over 3. Okay. Cosine of pi, so notice pi isn't one of these three. Pi is one of these. It's a quadrantal angle. So we're going to be using this one right here. We're going to be using negative 1, 0 for our x and our y. And cosine is x over r. So your x is negative 1. With this right here, your r is always equal to 1. So it's negative 1 over 1, which is just negative 1. Cosine pi over 4, we go to cosine. Go to pi over 4, it's just root 2 over 2. Okay, so secant, whenever you have one that is a reciprocal, we're first going to look for, the reciprocal of secant is cosine. So we're first going to look for the cosine of pi over 6, which in this case, here's cosine, here's pi over 6. It's root 3 over 2. And then because it's the reciprocal, we're going to flip it. And this one needs to be simplified, so we're going to multiply by root 3. And that gives you 2 root 3 over root 3 times root 3 gives you 3. So here is my final answer here. Finally, cotangent, 90 degrees. Here's another quadrantal. So we're going to be using this point right here for 90 degrees. 0, 1, which is your x and your y. Cotangent is x over y, which is 0 over 1. 0 divided by 1 is just 0, and there is your final answer.